The orange flyer hit my mailbox like a slap in the face from the devil himself. Attention! All swimming pools must be removed within 30 days or face fines up to $500 per day. Signed by none other than Karen Whitaker, our HOA president, the self-proclaimed guardian of suburban perfection. Little did she know, she had just declared war on the wrong veteran. I stood there in my driveway, the late afternoon sun beating down on my buzz-cut head, staring at that cheap piece of paper like it was written in Klingon. My pool, Grandpa's pride and joy, the one he dug by hand back in '78 with nothing but a shovel and a dream, now unsightly and disruptive to neighborhood harmony. Harmony? The woman who once fined Mrs. Delgado for hanging her American flag 2 inches too high was lecturing me about harmony? I crumpled the flyer but didn't throw it away. No, I folded it neatly, tucked it in my back pocket, and walked inside where Sarah was chopping vegetables and the kids were splashing in the very water Karen wanted gone. "Bad day?" Sarah asked, reading my face the way only a military wife can. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Karen Whitaker just banned our pool. The silence that followed was heavier than any rucksack I'd carried in Afghanistan. My kids froze mid-cannonball. Little Emma's eyes welled up. "But Daddy, that's where Grandpa taught us to swim." That was the moment the switch flipped. I wasn't the quiet, antisocial vet Karen had spent 2 years painting me as, the guy who supposedly lowered property values because my truck wasn't beige enough. I'd taken the slander, the anonymous notes on my windshield, the passive-aggressive neighborhood emails. I'd smiled through it all. Not anymore. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat at the kitchen table with every HOA covenant, city ordinance, and state property law I could download. Coffee went cold. Laptop fan whirred like a helicopter. Around 2 a.m., I found it, the loophole. Nothing in the bylaws said a damn thing about water features larger than a bird bath. They banned pools, sure. But a moat? A decorative retention pond for erosion control? Crickets. I leaned back, a slow grin spreading across my face, the kind that would have made my old drill sergeant proud. If Karen wanted to play dictator of beige suburbia, I'd give her a castle to rule. A castle surrounded by water. The next morning I called Bob, the only contractor in town who once told Karen to shove her color palette up her perfectly highlighted head. "Bob, how fast can you dig a trench around a house?" He laughed so hard I had to pull the phone away. "Marcus, you serious?" "Dead serious. Make it wide enough for a rowboat and deep enough to hide a regret." By noon the excavators rolled in, quietly, under the cover of landscaping upgrade. Neighbors peeked over fences, whispering. "Zen garden," one guessed. "Maybe he's finally fixing that ugly truck," another snickered. I just waved, sipping coffee like a man with nothing to hide. Karen's white SUV cruised by twice that first week. I could feel her eyes burning holes through the tinted windows. But she couldn't stop what she couldn't name. The trench grew, 10 feet wide, 8 feet deep, circling my entire property like a medieval embrace. Dirt trucks hauled away the evidence at dusk. By day 7 the shape was unmistakable to anyone who'd ever seen a castle movie. Sarah found me standing at the edge one evening, watching the sunset paint the raw earth gold. "You know she's going to lose her mind when she figures this out." I slipped my arm around her. "That's the point, babe. She already lost it the day she tried to erase Grandpa's legacy with a flyer." The laughter that bubbled up from my chest wasn't angry. It was the dark, delicious kind. The kind you feel when the bully finally picks on someone who bites back. Karen wanted conformity? I'd give her something so outrageously nonconformist, she'd choke on her own Pinterest board. Week 2, the walls were lined with stone. Bob's crew worked like ghosts. I added solar-powered lights along the inner rim, just enough to make the water glow at night like a smug middle finger to every aesthetic harmony rule in the book. The kids thought it was the coolest Ford ever built. I told them it was our new family tradition, defending what's ours. And then came the water. The water truck arrived at dawn like a Trojan horse on wheels. Gallons upon gallons poured in, turning my ridiculous trench into a shimmering, living moat. Lily pads floated lazily. Koi the size of dinner plates darted beneath the surface. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching my backyard transform from unsightly pool into a full-blown medieval flex. Karen's SUV screeched to a halt at the curb before the truck even finished. She stepped out in her signature pastel blazer, heels clicking like tiny judges' gavels. Her face went through 7 shades of Botox failure as she stared at the water. "Marcus Hale, what in God's name is this?" she demanded, voice syrupy sweet but trembling at the edges. I took a slow sip of coffee. "Morning, Karen. Just a little erosion control project. You know, climate change and all that. Very responsible homeowner stuff." She pointed a manicured finger. This is not a water feature. This is a moat." "Moat," I gasped, clutching my pearls like a southern belle. "Karen, I'm hurt. The city engineer called it a sustainable rainwater retention system. Check the permits. I've got 3 copies if you need them laminated." Her eyes narrowed to slits. She marched along the edge, heels sinking slightly in the fresh sod. "You think you're clever, don't you? The board will fine you into next year. We have standards." "Standards," I echoed, letting the word hang like a bad smell. "Like the one where you fine the Rodriguez family for planting tomatoes because vegetable gardens lower curb appeal? Or the time you tried to ban Christmas lights because they were too festive? Tell me, Karen, which HOA bylaw covers medieval defense systems?" Neighbors started gathering. Phones came out. Someone actually clapped. Karen's neck flushed the color of her flyer paper. She spun on her heel. "This isn't over. You'll drain this eyesore by Friday, or I'll have the sheriff here." She stormed off. I waved. "Have a blessed day, neighbor." That night, I printed the signs. Bold red letters. "Caution, alligators present. Enter at your own risk. Do not feed the fish." I staked them every 10 feet around the moat, then sat back with a beer and waited for the fireworks. They came faster than I expected. Karen showed up the very next morning wearing what I can only describe as a wildlife investigator outfit, khaki pants, binoculars, and a look of pure bureaucratic panic. She paced the sidewalk, muttering into her phone. "Yes, I'm looking at them right now. He's got alligators, I'm telling you." I leaned over the porch rail. "Morning, Karen. Beautiful day for a moat inspection. Want to come closer? The gators love visitors." She actually took one step toward the water before catching herself. "You're bluffing. This is harassment." "Harassment?" I laughed, genuinely this time. "Karen, you tried to erase my grandfather's blood, sweat, and tears with one piece of paper. I just added some decorative reptiles. Fair's fair." She left in a huff, but the damage was done. By lunchtime, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. "Alligators? Is he serious?" I always knew Marcus was crazy, in the best way. The drawbridge was the final touch. Bob had rigged a cute little wooden bridge with a manual crank. I may have loosened a few bolts the night before. Just a tiny bit. For science. Karen returned at dusk, clipboard in hand, determined to document violations. She marched straight onto the bridge like she owned the place. The creek was almost poetic. 1 second, she was the queen of the cul-de-sac. The next, she was flailing, pastel blazer flapping, perfect blonde bob going full swamp creature as she hit the water with a splash that sent koi flying. Lily pads stuck to her head like victory crowns. A small turtle I didn't even know was in there popped up beside her like, "Welcome to the party." I stood there with my phone recording, coffee in the other hand, grinning so wide my face hurt. "Need a hand, Karen? Or should I call the HOA board?" "Oh wait, you are the board." She sputtered, hair plastered to her face, mascara running in glorious black rivers. You planned this." "Me? I'm just a simple homeowner enjoying my legal water feature." The video hit the neighborhood Facebook group before she even climbed out. By midnight, it was everywhere. The memes started before breakfast. "Karen gets Moat. HOA president takes the plunge." One genius edited her fall to the Jaws theme. I refreshed my feed between bites of cereal, each new post sweeter than the last. The woman who'd spent years making everyone feel small was now the star of the internet's favorite comedy. Karen's retaliation was predictable. Emergency HOA meeting. Certified letters. Threats of lawsuits. She even tried to get animal control involved. But every time they knocked, I handed them the folder. Permits, environmental impact study, licensed wildlife sanctuary paperwork for the 3 baby alligators I'd officially adopted that very morning. Tiny things, really, size of house cats, more interested in sunbathing than biting. Still, The look on Karen's face when she saw them lounging on the rocks like tiny green mob bosses was priceless. You, you actually got alligators? She shrieked during the inspection. Rescued, Karen. From a sanctuary. Very eco-friendly. The HOA loves green initiatives, right? The board members shifted uncomfortably. One actually whispered, "This might be legal." Karen's empire cracked that day. Neighbors who'd stayed silent for years started speaking up at the meeting. She fined me for my wind chimes. She made my kid take down his basketball hoop. The tide turned so fast, I almost felt bad. Almost. 2 weeks later, her resignation letter appeared in every mailbox. Short, bitter, blamed personal health and toxic neighborhood dynamics. We all knew the truth. The queen had been dethroned by a moat, 3 alligators, and one very patient veteran who finally stopped taking it. I threw the party that weekend. Fairy lights strung across the moat. Music floating over the water. Kids feeding the koi while the baby gators napped in the shade. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now clapped me on the back. Sarah danced with me on the drawbridge, properly reinforced this time. Even old Mrs. Delgado brought her famous tamales. I stood at the edge later that night, beer in hand, watching the water reflect the stars. The pool was gone, but something better had taken its place. Not just a moat, a statement. A reminder that no clipboard-wielding tyrant gets to erase your family's story. Karen still lives 3 streets over. Drives the long way to avoid my house. Last I heard, she's selling essential oils now. Funny how the woman who wanted to control every blade of grass ended up peddling lavender to make ends meet. So here's the question that keeps me up at night, in the best way. Was I wrong for fighting back with a moat, alligators, and a perfectly legal splash of revenge? Or was Karen the real villain for thinking her power let her steal a family's legacy with one orange flyer? Drop your verdict in the comments. Because if an HOA ever comes for what's yours, well, now you know there's always a bigger splash waiting.